Mike has introduced previously. This is Ryan. I'm the CTO for the company, and
Yeah, and I'm on the enterprise sales team.
so thank you for coming here today. And we'll walk you through first some slides about the generative AI technology and how we use it in business intelligence, and then we'll do a demo so you get a perspective on how it all comes together. So what do we do at AnswerRocket? It's pretty easy. We help businesses talk to their data, right? A lot of people spend a lot of money getting data, and then they want to put it to use. We help them talk to it. We help them ask their questions, get the insights, interact. So what does that normally look like in a lot of companies? This is the problem we set out to solve when we created the business 10 years ago, because we had this problem, right? The problem is that when you want to go use your data, well, you've got to find it, you've got to join it up, you've got to clean it up, you've got to go through a long and tedious process. And if you want to make this into something that's self-service, that's really easy, that's frictionless, well, then you've got a problem, because only that much of it is actually self-service, right? There's pretty much everything else is calling somebody in IT, calling somebody in data governance, calling somebody in operations, trying to figure out where these sources are for all the information that you're trying to approach. So it's no wonder that about 25% of projects in business intelligence actually ever get legs. If we had that kind of problem in any other part of our life, we would probably not accept that, right? If 1 out of 4 cars worked, we wouldn't buy cars, right? You would, but that's what happens in BI. BI projects get off the ground, they get going, they get built, and then they get dropped because they're not friendly enough, not adoptable enough. Now, on the other hand, this GPT technology comes along and it's got an adoption curve like no tomorrow, right? Like none has ever occurred before. So GPT got to that 1 million user mark super fast. And the question is, why is that? Well, because it's essentially familiar and easy and frictionless, right? It's the kids are talking about it, the business users are talking about it, the executives are talking about it. So how can we take these two things and contrast them? BI solutions that don't get off the ground no matter what we try to invest, despite the value in them, and things like the GPT chatbot services, language models that get off the ground immediately and are so super successful. So you could say, well, gosh, why don't I just have the language model that everybody loves to use? Why don't I just have it do my BI? Well, it can do some parts of it, right? It can do a good job understanding the question. I could write code for years to understand how a human provides a date. 6 days after Black Friday, the first 3 weeks of the year, 6 years ago, the second quarter, right? That writing code to do all that would be a nightmare. I can just ask a language model, what are the dates that they're talking about? And it'll tell me that back. Good news, right? On the other hand, the language models also like to fill in dates. If you haven't provided one, they're thirsty to generate, right? If there's not a date, it'll make a date up for you. You don't want it to do that. If you're asking about a specific fact in business and that fact hasn't been provided to it, it'll make one up, right? It's the nature of the G in GPT, right? So this AI technology, the language model technology that's so useful in a lot of different ways, has a few gaps relative to how it could work in business intelligence. So we find this representation kind of shows us the best of both worlds. Yes. Oh, sorry. Got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. So this representation tries to give us the best of both worlds, right? On one hand, you've got an enterprise-ready language model. It understands languages and translations and all the other ways that business users want to talk. And you have, on the other side of the picture, you've got the augmented analytics platforms, like an AnswerRocket, that's able to retrieve your data and do your analysis and make forecasts and be very governed and very accurate. And right in the middle of those two, if we can combine the strengths of those two, you can have something that's intuitive to use, but it's also robust for your business. You can drive adoption because it's not hard to get going, and yet it can be comprehensive and truly powerful because it's backed up by a lot of analytics. So I'm going to take another cut at this right before we turn it over to Ryan. So this is more of the pipeline view, right? Not quite the tech slide. There's a tech slide towards the end. But how can the LLM help in these 4 phases of the pipeline that is essentially the business intelligence problem, right? So in the data preparation side, well, you can just give the LLM the schema and ask it to describe it for you. And it'll say, oh, I see some sales figures. I see some date columns. I understand that these are zip codes, right? Again, things that you could write code on until the cows come home and still not get all the patterns right. You ask a language model to do it, and it'll solve it like that, right? On the query side, when it's time to actually understand what the user wants, well, again, the language model is very good at understanding the subtleties in language. I had a great example the other day where user said, hey, what are my top 5 products in whatever category? And it listed 5 products. And then the user said, well, what are the dogs? Well, I could write code for years to make it know that dogs means the bottom 5 products, but the LLM knew it like that. I didn't have to train anything. I didn't have to provide any synonyms, didn't have to go through any, that buzzword, ontologies, right? It just did it. It just knew it, right? So understanding the question, understanding intents. And then the next part, of course, is basically helping analyze and visualize the data. So being able to take existing documents that might contain some information and augment what comes out of the database, being able to take things like the language that's used to access data and help us generate either JSON or SQL or other kinds of patterns like that. And then finally, the ability to interpret the results, right? So if you're thinking about, I have all these results, all these facts that I've extracted from databases, observations that I've made, insights, being able to explain those back to the user. And do so in a way that's compelling and is story-like. All right, so we're almost at the point where we're going to hand over to the demo. You're about to meet Max. Max is an intelligent business analytics agent. Basically, it's conversational, but it's connected to your data. It's using GPT to understand you and to keep a conversation flow going, but everything that it tells you is verified and backed up by fact, and it's kept secure all along the way of producing the answer. So this is my last slide before I hand over. 3 major components to what you're seeing today. On one side, the insights engine. This is the AnswerRocket solution that we've been developing for years that says, based on your data, what are the patterns? What are the outliers? What are the key drivers of your business, right? All the key outcomes using many different traditional machine learning models to apply to your data to produce insights. The next block over is the Knowledge Hub. This is where we combine the insights that we got from database answers that are based on models with unstructured data that came from the enterprise, PowerPoints, PDFs, transcriptions of meetings, emails, right? Combine those into that Knowledge Hub, and finally you generate a story off of all of it on the far right to get the answer ultimately for the user. And I'll hand it over to Ryan.
And so as you can see, we're logged in here to Max, and Max actually understands a handful of data sets. We've got a few here loaded in, an S&P 500 data set, a pasta data set, which we'll look at, that looks at US manufacturers of pasta, their sales and marketing kind of efforts, as well as a pharma data set. And at the bottom down here, I have a chat window, just like you would on OpenAI's ChatGPT. And I can start to type a question. So I can ask something like, how did pasta do last year? And as I hit enter, just like Mike explained, the large language model GPT is actually pulling intent out of my question. It's already parameterized it, and now it's passed these parameters to the AnswerRocket analytical engine to pull all of the facts. And now once we find all of the observations, the trend, the forecast, the anomalies, the drivers, we pass all of that back into GPT, and GPT starts answering my question on the fly live. So you can see it's pulling performance numbers and writing that into a nice summary that an end business user can then understand. And then you'll see at the end here, it actually supports it with the data table that we pulled, all of the analysis that we did. So if I scroll up and look at the, and I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit, look at the analysis that was performed. We're looking at the entire pasta category, all manufacturers in 2022 and comparing it to 2021. How did it change year over year? And we're pulling growth numbers. We're looking at drivers that, hey, shortcut and filled pasta did really well. 16 ounce as a pack size did really well. And then we summarize that there at the bottom for the end user. And I can actually take a look at the data table that supports all of this information, right? So we're even ranking these drivers across dimensional breakouts. So I can see that 16 ounce was the #1 driver across any manufacturer of pasta in the US. I can see then shortcut and filled pasta were the second and third drivers, and then we rank the following drivers as they showed up in the data set. You can see we actually looked at quite a few different dimensional breakouts. If I go back to the data table, we looked at 140 something base sizes. We looked at a handful of segments. I think it's 7. We also looked at 570 different manufacturers, and we looked at over 700 brands to generate this analysis. It's really powerful to use AI to look at every possible combination. What we've seen today is that most of our customers have a hypothesis, right? They might have been in the field for 20 years and they kind of know how their products and their competitors operate. So they don't look at every possible combination, but they might be missing something. So the AI does a comprehensive deep dive and then presents the findings back to the end user. And because this is large language model GPT powered, I can actually ask follow-up questions. So I can maybe drill into one of the manufacturers and I could say, well, how about Ebro Foods? And now without giving it any additional context, it says, oh, I know we're talking about pasta in 2022, but Ryan wants to just look at one specific manufacturer. And so now we're getting a secondary analysis, a drill in, to understand what are the drivers of Ebro Foods sales, right? It might be different than the entire category sales for 2022. And so it's continuing to then answer my question and generate another narrative. And one of the really cool things we're doing with all of the text we're generating is we're storing these as articles. So we're taking structured data and generating an unstructured article, which then allows us to pair that with other unstructured data without having to harmonize it and pull context out of it, right? We have an article repository as users generate these articles. And maybe, a month from now, somebody asks a question about pasta in 2022, and Max will find 3 or 4 different articles and summarize all of them together in one article, and it will tell you that. So at the top here, above the parameters, it says, hey, I created and reviewed a new article to answer your question. But in the future, it might say, hey, I found 6 articles and reviewed them and generated a new article for you. Again, I can continue my conversation and maybe I want to trend it. So I can say, trend that for me. So now I'm asking it to do something with the previous question, right? I've got a full year's worth of data. So maybe I want to see, well, how did that change over the year? What does that look like? Or maybe I'm looking for a forecast or something with that data. So now we're running a different model in the background. And now we're looking at Ebro Foods' specific trend over 2022 and getting another article that we then house in our repository that other users can use for their analysis as we continue to ask more and new questions. So you can see there it chose a linear model to forecast and gives us a forecast with a confidence level for the next month.
And all the numbers that it's producing, right, that you would typically see, the fear of hallucination with language models is removed because we're fact checking all of that as it comes out of the language model and verifying that those are input facts. We can go all the way back to either the source article or the database query that resulted in that fact being produced. So it is reliable and trustworthy, and ultimately is as solid of a result as you would get from a traditional BI tool. But it's coming, again, through the language model.
And so now we've drilled into Ebro Foods, but they have 17 brands. So maybe I want to look at this on the brand level. So now I've asked it to just break that trend out by all of their different brands, see who their winners and maybe who some of their losers are in terms of pasta in the US in 2022. And so now we've taken this trend and we're looking at things like monthly growth rates, and how they're performing and how they're trending over the year. And in this next visualization, along with the article that we're writing, it's going to actually break out all of those brands on a single line chart, so I can see that obviously Ronzoni is their flagship brand, and they have a few other brands here like Cremette and Skinner and American Beauty, and I can see that some of their bottom ones here like Wacky Mac didn't do so hot in 2022. So as an analyst, I can very quickly figure out that maybe I need to do a little bit of work on marketing for Wacky Mac or something like that. So with that, we have 5 minutes left. I would love to open it up to questions or comments from the audience.
I have a question.
Yes.
Unless there's anybody in the audience who wants to go first. So I wanted to learn more a little bit about the evolution of this product as different aspects of AI involved. So like GPT-4, for example, has computer vision capabilities, maybe feeding images as a mechanism. Recently, there's some opening of live data through the web with GPT. And anything else that's part of your product development roadmap, call it compelling features that you're looking to implement that you could disclose.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So obviously, GPT-4 is coming out, and many other language models are as well. And we and many others are foreseeing that language models become like another enterprise resource, right? Like a database or like a cloud compute resource. So we'll be able to work with lots of different ones as those become multimodal, as they begin to be able to look at images, begin to look at even video, to make transcripts of audio. Those just become more input documents into the chat conversation that the user has. So we envision AnswerRocket and Mac specifically really becoming something that can look across any digital asset of the business and be able to provide answers and insights based on that. In addition, obviously, there are a number of capabilities that Max has today, as you were seeing, retrieving data, answering questions. We also believe that as the training of Max increases or improves, it'll be able to take more and more sophisticated steps towards making recommendations, towards essentially helping implement business policy, not just retrieve information. So yes.
Could you elaborate on validating the data?
Yeah.
Could you please
elaborate on validating the data?
Yeah.
100%, sure, absolutely. So you have to think of the language model will fabricate answers. It will hallucinate when it is underspecified, right? When if I say, what color is this apple, it'll give me a color, right? If I give it facts, if I give it the facts that relate to the question, it won't make up its own facts, right? It'll use those facts. So first thing we have to do is make sure that we understand the question. Even though GPT is going to answer the question, we have to make sure that it's given us the intent of the question first. Is this a comparison? Are you looking for a trend? Is it about outliers? Are you simply trying to predict something, right? So once we know the intent of the question, we're able to supply the facts to GPT that will help it answer the question. But GPT wants those facts to be in a language form. I can't dump a database table into it and say good luck, right? So instead, the work that AnswerRocket has done traditionally and for many of our customers is to take that structured data that's in the database and convert it into something unstructured. That's been our bread and butter for years, has been natural language generation off of database. So now that natural language that we generate becomes feedstock into the GPT conversation, right? Yes.
So does it mean that you're getting the data and converting it to like a prompt command to GPT?
Yeah, so right, the GPT models are all based on, sorry, the question. So the question is, are we using prompting to achieve this? And so, yeah, the APIs into GPT there are several of them. The completion, which is the prompt-based one, is used. Embeddings are used. That's the one where we try to essentially analyze semantic similarity. But both of those get used, and some of the other ones as well. Yes.
Hi, I'm Manish Bhutan. I'm CEO of Artificial Machines. So I had a question about, if you're using a bunch of back-end models, like say GPT-4 API, and you said there are other third-party models. So two things, like if we upload our own data into your system, what about the data security? And if you're making me connect or giving you my credentials to go into some data stores, like two things. One is, how are you managing that security part? And the second thing is, it's not just your safety with the data, which you're taking care of in your system, but you're also pushing all this to third-party back-end models. So what about the data there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the AnswerRocket serves enterprise customers, Fortune 500 customers around the world, and we've been through many, many different audits of our technology. And so we know that the expectations for governance and for managing the data. The way that these language models work is really no different than, let's say, a cloud database. In other words, if you look at, and I'm not talking about the teenagers using GPT online. That's if you read the fine print, they're allowed to use your data. You should never upload data just to the public-facing GPT. But if you use the API to access OpenAI, or if you go through a private instance of an OpenAI model, like Microsoft is providing through Azure, then you have the commitment of the safety of that data as though it were going into a cloud database. So you have the very similar in terms of the terms of that of the uses of that data, the transport, the storage, the destruction in the case that you need it, not using it for third parties. So really, it's that back end provider of the language infrastructure that is giving you the assurance that's needed for those enterprise governance requirements to show that the data is safe.
So, gentlemen, we're out of time, but
Yep.
we do appreciate the insight, and I'm sure everyone can take a snapshot of this. If you're still interested in asking a question, feel free to reach out. And
Yeah.
thank you.